The world's two largest economies have moved beyond rhetoric and threats to a trade war. Both the U.S. and China launched new tariffs against each other today. The Trump administration imposed its new fees on Chinese goods at midnight. China retaliated immediately. Amna Nawaz looks at the strategies of both sides and the potential consequences.
President Trump sent into motion 25% tariffs on more than 800 Chinese imported goods, including aircraft engines, industrial machinery, and parts for electronics, to name just a few. Now, China hit back with tariffs of its own on more than 500 U.S.-made goods, some of which target areas of the country that voted heavily for Mr. Trump. That includes exports like soybeans, pork, and corn. Let's break down how both sides are positioning themselves and where the impact of the tariffs will be felt first. David Honig is an attorney who teaches negotiations at Indiana University, and Yasheng Huang is a professor who studies the Chinese economy and global business at the MIT Sloan School of Management. Thank you both for being here. David Honig, I want to start with you. Talk to me about the negotiating style that we have seen so far with President Trump. You break them down into a couple of categories. One is called distributive bargaining. That's what we're seeing here. What does that mean?
Distributive bargaining is really exactly what it sounds like. The people in the negotiation are simply deciding how they're going to distribute a limited pool, and otherwise they have no interests in common. They're just trying to figure out who gets more slices of the pie or how much a cabinet maker is going to get paid off of his invoice for the person who put cabinets in a casino.
And the flip side of that is integrated bargaining. How are the two different?
Integrative bargaining is everything else. Integrative bargaining exists when there is not a complete lack of interest between the two, where they may be able to help each other, where there may be a future relationship, where they may be able to hurt each other, or where they simply may be back at the negotiation table another time.
So make this real for me in the context we're talking about. When we're talking about a trade war with China, what have we seen from President Trump that speaks to you about distributive bargaining?
Well, what I've seen from the president is treating just about every negotiation as something that is distributive. It's complete win-lose. It is take it or leave it, without the appearance, at least, of a recognition that we're going to come back to the table another time and that we have mutual interests.
Professor Huang, let's talk about the flip side of this now. We see where President Trump seems to be coming from in negotiating style and tactics. From what we've seen from China's actions and response, what seems to be their strategy to the trade war?
I think their strategy is the integrated bargaining, as Mr. Honig described. They did signal that they wanted to reach an agreement with the Trump administration. First, they talked about making concessions on the trade front, buying more goods from the United States to narrow the trade imbalances between the two countries. Then they actually took the step of lowering tariffs on goods critical to American companies, automobiles and drugs and a whole range of products. They also at least signaled that they were willing to talk about IP issues, intellectual property rights issues, the entry by the foreign firms in the Chinese market, financial sector, and other issue areas. But they didn't get a positive response from the Trump administration, precisely because the strategy pursued by the Trump administration is kind of a take it or leave it. That doesn't really leave the Chinese with much room to maneuver.
David Honig, now that we are where we are in a sort of tit for tat with tariffs, talk to me about the ripple effect. U.S. imposes tariffs, at least a Chinese tariff, just with soybeans as an example. Right now, China, we know, has canceled those soybean orders. They are nearly a third of the entire soybean crop purchasing power there. That's a big hit to the U.S. economy. What next? Where does the ripple effect go from there?
It is a big hit, and it shows the danger of treating something that is distributive that truly isn't. So what we see is we not only see damage to American farmers because they're not able to sell their soybeans, but what happened next is China bought their soybeans from Russia. They tripled their purchases from Russia. The ripple effect beyond that is not only is Russia now buying soybeans, selling soybeans, and American farmers are losing them, but Russia is now getting hard currency. So if you go outside trade and look at American ability to project its power, now sanctions are going to be less effective because our sanctions addressed at Russia go to limiting their availability for hard currency, and we put them in a situation where they can get more of that from China.
Professor Huang, you seem to be saying earlier that the two sides are coming at it with very different approaches. But look, President Trump is basically doing what he promised he would do. He's taking that tough style of bargaining and applying it to what has been an uneven relationship in the past, right? When it comes to the U.S. and China trade balance there. If nothing has worked to even it out before, maybe could this work now?
Well, I disagree with the view that the trade imbalance in and of itself is about uneven relationship between the two countries. The trade imbalance is driven by deep structural economic factors within these two countries. One country has a very high savings rate, the other country has a lower savings rate. But I do want to make it clear that there are objective problems between China and the United States. I will view IP as an issue, entry of foreign firms into Chinese market as another legitimate issue. The problem that I have with the Trump administration is not so much that they invoke trade war as a tactic to get the Chinese to come to the negotiating table. The problem I have is that they are now pursuing this as an end in and of itself, and that's very reckless. To escalate the trade war is going to be bad for Chinese economy for sure, but it is also going to be bad for the U.S. economy because much of the consumption in this country is produced by Chinese companies. A lot of the components sourced by U.S. companies are produced by Chinese companies. Is going to have a huge ripple effect on the U.S. economy as well. So it's okay to threaten China with a trade war, but to actually use it is reckless.
David Honig, now that they are actually using it, where is the off-ramp? How does this end?
I don't know. I'm not sure that they've anticipated an off-ramp. The same thing happened when they shut down the agreement with Iran and told everybody, okay, stop buying oil as of November 1st, and all of the countries said, we can't replace it yet. And this week, the U.S. State Department said, okay, well, go ahead and keep buying oil, because they didn't anticipate an off-ramp. So I don't know where we get off. And I think that's why some of us who observe negotiations, and certainly Professor Huang, whose expertise is much deeper in China and trade, are concerned.
Professors David Honig and Yasheng Huang, thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Thank you.